So we are in the Getting to Work series where we're going through the tools that we've introduced to you. Now we're going to show you how we can get them to work, how we use each of these tools. So I talked a little bit about restoring a hand plane, particularly these wooden bodied planes. And we looked at that last time and walked through some of the steps. But now what I want to do is show you, how do you use this thing? How does this actually make good shavings that can do good work? We're going to dive into this, and I'm going to show you first my four plane and my jack plane, one of a few that I have here. And I'll show you how I get this set up. Basically, the first thing to think about with a wooden plane is, how do you adjust this thing? There are no knobs, there's nothing, there are no adjusters here. And so some people might be kind of hindered by that and think, well, it's not very intuitive. I can't see what I'm supposed to turn. And actually, once you are shown how it works, it's actually much more intuitive than all these little silly knobs that you have to mess with. So let me show you how this works. Basically, what you want to be able to do is you want the iron to be able to go deeper and to retract and to go side to side laterally. Those are the adjustments you want to make. So deeper, less, and then side to side. And they're quite simple. So what you have the wedge up top, and to go deeper, think about what you have to do to make it go deeper. You just tap the iron down this way, and then you give the wedge a little wrap to tighten it up. So that's how you make that go deeper. Now you'll notice when I did that, I had my finger down here. So if you can see, every time I'm doing an adjustment, I have my finger resting right on there. So the way that edges work, if you're not already a woodworker and haven't experienced this, I can I can gently touch the edge of this and I'm okay. Is if I go side to side, that's when you get sliced. So if you touch an edge, if you push on an edge, it's probably not going to burst your finger open. But if you slice across it, that's when you have problems happen. So therefore, it's okay to rest your finger gently right there, as long as you're not slicing back and forth, right? So I will always keep my finger here, because your fingers are very sensitive and can pick up really minute little adjustments. So I can feel all of that, right? And I actually can feel that's a little bit much. And this is because, like I was talking about, that your fingers can pick up really subtle, minute adjustments. My finger, over time, after you do this a little bit, you can feel the difference. So I haven't looked at this. I know a lot of people do this thing, and this has been done for hundreds and hundreds of years. People, they sight down the sole, and they want to see the projection of the iron. And I don't know if it's just my eyes or what it is, but this does not mean really anything to me. I can see it, but it's really hard to look down the sole and find that projection. I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but if your eyes are a lot better than mine, then maybe you're fine. But if you're not, if you're like me, and that just seems like really hard to figure out, I just have my finger right here. So, all right, so I've already said I can feel, I know, I don't have to look at it, but I know that this is too strong of a projection. It's going to be too deep of a cut. So, what you want to be doing is you can tap forward, but then to retract it, to send the iron back. Think about that. How would you bring the iron back? Well, you kind of actually want to do the reverse. Instead of sending the iron down, you want to send the body down. You want to shock the body forward. And the way that inertia works, you remember from school, that the iron stays put. The iron and the wedge want to stay in the air. And if you hit the body, they want to stay put. So it loosens the wedge and loosens the iron. And so we talked about the strike buttons on the top. This is just a little inlay that's put into the top here. Not all wooden planes have this. Not essential, but sometimes this helps just to be able to hit on that. And you can use a hammer, as we've shown in previous videos. I often will use a mallet, just because it has more longevity in that. So I'm still holding this. One thing to note as I do this, I have a double iron. You'll remember from the last video, there's a cap iron and a regular iron. And that's so thick that it can't come out of my mouth down here. It can't fall to the ground. It's so thick. So if I stand this, I'm standing over the floor here. If I release this and it accidentally falls out, it's not going to hit the floor because it's too thick. However, there are some planes that don't have a cap iron. It's just a single iron plane. And if that's the case, and you loosen it, and you don't have your finger there, and you're just hanging out over the space, you can send that iron right to the floor or to someone's ankle or to whatever. And these tools, as you know, are razor sharp, so you don't want to do that. So if you have a single iron plane, I would highly, highly recommend doing that over the workbench so that if it does fall, it just hits your workbench top. That's one of the, ironically, it is one of the primary reasons I like double iron planes. I know that makes me sound neurotic, but I really like that feature. To release this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shock the body forward, which will allow the wedge in the iron to retract just a bit. And I'm feeling as I do this. Did you hear that change in tone? And I'll actually, if I tighten it back up, you hear that change in tone? I tightened the wedge. So when you apply the wedge here, it's pressing the body out. And that's why, if you remember, when I flattened the sole of the plane in the last video, I needed to do that with the wedge in place because it'll flex the body just a hair. So now I can tell this is going to take nothing. I can feel it's basically flush with the bottom. So let's just do this. Right? Nothing's happening. So I can feel that. And again, once you get practicing with this, I would recommend the first time you're adjusting a wooden plane, set it so that it's basically flush and you can feel that and say, I'm not sure if that'll take a shaving. And then try that and you go, okay, yeah, nothing's happening. Okay, no problem. So let's tap it. I felt that jump forward just a little bit, but I'm not sure that much is going to happen here. We'll see, just a little bit maybe. Oh, just a few whiskers. Yeah. So you hear that? A few shavings. So this is now a really light cut. And it's able to hit this high spot, this high edge, and this high edge, but it's still quite weak for a 4-plane. So now all of this is just by feel, and I can tell what I want. So a 4-plane is taking shavings more like that. So these aren't massively thick, but you can hear them crunching. That's a 4-plane shaving, and you can go as heavy as you want, as heavy as you can muscle here. Let's see. And you can take a lot of material really fast that way. Let's say you're saying, okay, wow, that's too much. You can still back up a little bit. So that's that. When you have a curved iron, a cambered iron like this, the lateral adjustment is less relevant, because if it's curved and you're going to turn it side to side, it's still just a curve. The straighter your iron is, the more that's relevant. So, for example, on a smoothing plane like this, that is going to have a lot less camber and is going to take a finer shaving. That's pretty relevant, because what that means is the corners, the very corners of your iron are, because there's less camber, the corners are a lot closer to the mouth. They're about to come out of the mouth. So what you don't want is, you don't want the corners of your iron to dig into the board. That would be bad. That would be ugly. So you can see this. So right now I was just hitting the high spots of the 4-plane. Right? So that's pretty well set up. But let's make some adjustments here. So if let me go forward a little bit. This is probably going to be heavier than I would do, but for demonstration, let me show you. Yeah, that's more than I would do. Not quite hitting the edge yet, but let's do this. I'm going to tap it side to side. See the lateral adjustment? And what that's going to do is that's sending this opposite corner down. And I'm sure that's going to dig in a little bit faintly. Let's see if I can get it a little bit more. I don't typically try to do this. Let's see here. So it's hard to see, but there is a little line that I'm making with that. So the way you would do the adjusting is, I'll put it back to, now you can see I'm feeling with 2 fingers. I'm feeling to make sure it's even, but I'm only so good at that. That is so fine that to be able to tell the difference is tricky. So one thing you can do is you can use a wooden block. And there are 3 spots you want to be looking at. The 2 outside edges, or the ends, the corners of the iron, and then the very middle. Because it's cambered, because you have a curve to it, it's of course going to take a deeper bite in the middle than the 2 ends. And you don't want the very, very ends to be taking any shaving, because if that happens, you're going to be digging a track in here. So if you really are doing these fine adjustments, you can use a block to see the difference. So right out here, I'm getting nothing. And if I go right out here, I'm just catching that very corner. So I can even those up. And then the center is going to take, let me flip it around. The center is going to take a thicker one. I can hear it. I can feel it in my hand too. So those are the 2 things that I would be thinking about. The finger holding, and then the wooden block, just a piece of scrap wood to be able to test the difference. But when you have a smoothing plane tuned up, it really does beautiful work. And you'll see the difference between setting up and using a 4-plane and setting up and using a smoothing plane. It's like 2 different animals. It's totally different species, you know. The 4-plane is a different thing, and it's really for taking a lot of meat. And then when you feel like you've mastered that, then you jump to a smoothing plane and you realize, oh wow, it's just a different. There are a lot of different considerations with it. So those are the 2 different planes. And what I want to show you is troubleshooting. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, it's really hard to show you down inside of the mouth. I mean, it's hard to even show someone in person right next to you because you can't even really see yourself. So trying to troubleshoot when you are having problems as you're planing, what's going on? A lot of times the problems relate to shavings jammed up in the mouth somewhere. You're trying to make a shaving and then all of a sudden and it gets all balled up and you can't figure it out and you have to like pull the wedge out, which by the way, as we I think talked about in the last video, you'd pull the wedge out completely by tapping that, and you can release it and say, oh, all that stuff that's stuck in there. And then you can slide it back in, holding it with your finger, place the wedge on top. You heard that difference, I think? It's like a drum. And you're ready to go back to work. So because I can't show you inside of the mouth, because there's no way to get the camera in there or even stick your own head inside of there, what I have over here is a plane that I use for demonstration purposes. This one, as you can tell, was rotten away. So I ripped it in half, I cut it in half to be able to show you what's going on inside the mouth. So we're gonna try this. I'm gonna lay this down on the bench and we're gonna get this overhead view. So what you can see here is this is the mouth. So this is the sole of the plane, the iron right here, and then the cap iron on top. See how they meet right there? And then this is half of the wedge, which is up tight against this line right here. This is called the abutment. So this is abutting this piece of wood, and this is the cheek here. So you have the breast and then the wear. There's no test, so you don't have to remember this. But this is enabling us to see down inside the mouth what's going on. So ideally, what you have going on with this is when the shaving comes up the mouth, it's of course cutting right here, and then you can see how the breast line is giving you a relief. This whole area is called the throat. So the shavings come up out of the throat. That's the ideal. And so you can see there should be nothing impeding that. If there was, as we talked about in the last video, if there's a gap between the cap iron and the iron, the top and bottom here, a little gap in there, a shaving could get jammed right in there, and then it wouldn't be able to come up and out. So you also have to look for other areas of impedance. Is that a word? Areas that you can be impeded. So you have a shaving coming up somewhere and getting hung up. Now there's a secondary ramp right here on the wedge, so that shouldn't interfere with anything. The shaving should be able to come up and out like this. So it'd be like, like that. It's going to curl because especially because of the cap iron, but it curls as it comes up. and out. But you can see right down here, this is a great example. Do you see this prong or this finger of the wedge? So this is what's going on down inside the mouth, down inside the throat, down toward the mouth. You have the prong or the finger, and you see how it's overhanging the cap iron right here? That, let me get down here and show you. So that space right there, that's bad news. When that prong is overhanging that cap iron, that's a problem, because check this out. What you're going to have happening is the shaving comes up and it goes and it gets stuck, and then it goes like, it just crunches, and that's what happens inside your mouth, and you're stuck. So what you want to be doing is making sure that you don't have, see that's annoying. You don't want to have that space. You don't want to have a gap where your prongs, your fingers are overhanging your cap iron right here. That's bad. So what you can do is you can trim them back a little bit. This is kind of an extreme example, but sometimes what'll happen is as the plane wears and you sharpen the iron, because this iron's tapered and it comes further, it gets thinner, and so the wedge comes further. It's just basically, long story short, sometimes over time the wedge will get closer and closer, and you got to trim that back a little bit. So you don't want the finger or the prong to overhang the high spot on the cap iron. Also, if your cap iron is set way far back, like let's say this space between the edge and the front of the cap iron is, you put it to like, I don't know, 3/8 of an inch or something, really huge, well, that would cause a problem too, because now you're opening that area up. So you do want your cap iron to be, reasonably close to that. 1/8 of an inch is functionally out of the way. So that's what's going on inside the mouth. And there really aren't too many other situations. Sometimes the abutment is bad and there'll be a shaving that'll jam inside of there. But in my experience, that's pretty rare. Sometimes where the wedge meets the top of the cap iron, that'll be another area. But the whole idea is, as you're planing, when you have something jam, sometimes what'll happen is if you skew the plane so that you're planing at a 45 diagonally across a board, you'll find one prong is catching all of the shavings. And so if you have it jammed up, the very first thing you should do is stop, pull it up, look inside of there, and say, get out your little knife or whatever, your awl, and poke around in there and say, where is it catching? And I bet you 9 times out of 10, it's a prong that's overhanging. So those are the things to be looking for. And basically, as long as your iron is seated to the bed properly, and as long as you don't have any prongs or anything overhanging, any big gaping holes ready to eat shavings, you want those shavings to be able to slide right up and out the throat. Those are really the only factors you need to troubleshoot as you're dealing with this. It's very common for a plane to need a little bit of fettling, a little bit of adjusting, but that's pretty much it. So I hope that was helpful to you. As you're picking up these old planes, it's a really unfortunate thing when someone picks up a plane that's been abused or left alone for a long time and needs a little, maybe 20 minutes of touch up, and someone picks that tool up and tries to use it and then concludes, well, these tools just are not effective. That's a tragedy, because that's not true. The tool's not set up. I mean, how would a table saw run if it didn't have power, if it wasn't plugged in, or if it didn't have a blade? You know what I mean? Every tool has to be set up properly. And so when you have a properly set up hand plane, you'll be amazed at how efficient and how powerful these tools are. So that's basically the overall. Those are the basic points. If you have other questions, you can put comments below. I'm not always on YouTube, so I don't always catch all the comments, but I'll do what I can. But really the place that Mike and I kind of hang out all the time is the M&T Daily Dispatch. That's the place that we every day are publishing things, answering questions. We have a forum. We have a whole bunch of different stuff going on there. So if you're interested in, more regular engagement, kind of asking questions about, I got this tool, what's going on with it, you can subscribe to the Daily Dispatch and click up here, and you can join us, join in the conversation in the forums, and we hope to see you there.